I used to think I was happy. Maybe I was, or maybe I'd just gotten so good at pretending that I couldn't tell the difference anymore. You know that feeling when you look at your life from the outside and everything seems perfect? The house, the husband, the kids, the routine. But inside, you're disappearing. Fading, like you're being erased one day at a time and nobody notices. Not even you. Until suddenly you do. And by then, it's too late. Everything you thought you knew about yourself, about your marriage, about who you are, it all shatters. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, you're the one holding the hammer. My name is Mia. I'm 37 years old. I live in a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood where people wave when you drive by and nobody ever seems to fight. On the surface, my life looks like something out of a catalog. Clean countertops, fresh flowers on the dining table, two healthy kids who still hug me goodnight, but surfaces lie, and I've been lying to myself for longer than I care to admit. Daniel, that's my husband. 15 years we've been married. 15 years of building something together, brick by brick, promise by promise. He's not a bad man. I need you to understand that. He's responsible, driven, focused. He works in finance, which means early mornings that start before the sun rises and late nights that stretch past dinner. Endless conference calls with people who only seem to care about numbers and margins and quarterly projections. I used to admire that about him. I used to love how sharp he was, how in control he always seemed, like nothing could shake him, like he had all the answers. But somewhere along the line, that control turned into distance. The steadiness I fell in love with became coldness I couldn't reach through anymore. He was a good provider. I'll give him that. The bills were always paid on time. The fridge was always full. The kids always had what they needed. New shoes before the old ones wore out. Birthday parties that other parents envied. Vacations to places with white sand and clear water. But as a husband? Emotionally, physically, he checked out. And maybe I had too in my own way. I just didn't want to admit it. He hadn't touched me like he meant it in over a year. Not passionately. Not with any real presence. The kind of touch that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room that had disappeared long ago. Now it was just the occasional brush of a shoulder in the kitchen, a dry kiss on the cheek before bed. Mechanical, obligatory. We'd become roommates, coordinators of schedules and logistics. Parents, but not lovers, not even friends, really. And the thing is, I didn't even realize how deeply that emptiness had settled into me until I started avoiding mirrors. Until the sound of his key in the front door made me feel more dread than joy. Until I stopped caring what I looked like when I got dressed in the morning because I knew he wouldn't notice anyway. I have two kids, a boy and a girl, 8 and 6. They're my world, my heartbeat, the reason I get out of bed every morning. But even motherhood, as beautiful and all-consuming as it is, can swallow you whole if you're not careful. I was constantly giving. Breakfast, school runs, homework, soccer practice, dance recitals, bath time, bedtime stories, tucking in, kissing foreheads. Rinse and repeat, day after day after day. No one tells you how much of yourself you'll lose, how easily your name becomes mom and nothing else. How you can stand in a room full of people who love you and still feel completely invisible. Most days I felt like a ghost. Everyone needed me, but no one really saw me. I was a function. A role, not a person anymore. And then there was Nathan. Nathan had been Daniel's best friend since college, 20 years of history between them. Roommates, groomsmen, the kind of friendship that survives distance and time and all the ways life tries to pull people apart. He was the opposite of Daniel in so many ways. Where Daniel was quiet and serious, Nathan was open and light. He had this way of making people feel at ease, like you could breathe a little easier when he was around. He laughed easily, teased without being mean, and he looked at people when they spoke. Really looked. Like what you were saying actually mattered to him. He'd been around our family for years. Birthday parties, summer barbecues, random Saturday afternoons watching football on TV. Always the fun uncle, the extra hand, the one who brought over dessert even when no one asked. Wine or brownies or some ridiculous cake from the bakery across town that he drove 20 minutes out of his way to get. And I'd never really seen him in that way before. Never thought of him as anything other than Daniel's friend, part of the furniture of our lives. Until one day I did. It was after his divorce. His wife, Lauren, had left him for someone else. A coworker, apparently. Someone who paid attention. Someone who wasn't always traveling for work. Nathan moved back to town, trying to get his life in order again, trying to figure out how to be alone after 10 years of marriage. He'd stopped by more often. Sometimes to talk to Daniel, sometimes just because he was bored and didn't want to sit in his empty apartment staring at walls that still had picture hooks with nothing hanging on them. And slowly, he and I started talking more. About nothing at first. The weather, the kids, what was on Netflix. Then about life. Then about the things we missed, the things we needed, the things we thought we had but didn't. The conversations that matter. The ones that make you feel less alone. I remember one night, Daniel was upstairs working late in his office, the door closed, the blue glow of his computer screen seeping out underneath. I was cleaning up after dinner, loading the dishwasher, wiping down counters, the usual routine. Nathan stayed behind to help. He rolled up his sleeves and started drying the dishes I handed him, and we talked about music, about how the world had changed, about how lonely it felt sometimes to be an adult, to have everything you're supposed to want and still feel like something's missing. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, he looked at me, really looked, and said, "You know, you've still got that spark. Don't let anyone make you forget that." It was such a small thing to say. Just one sentence, but I swear it was like someone opened a window inside me I didn't even know had been closed. Fresh air rushed in, and suddenly I could breathe again. I could feel again. From then on, something shifted. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way Nathan lingered after dropping something off. The way he listened when I talked about the kids or my day or even nothing important at all. The way he smiled, like he knew something I didn't. Like he saw something in me I thought had disappeared years ago. Buried under laundry and grocery lists and the weight of being everything to everyone except myself. I didn't flirt, not at first. I didn't cross any lines. But I can't lie and say I wasn't drawn to the attention, the warmth, the validation. It felt like water after years in a desert. Our home was beautiful on the outside. Granite countertops, white walls that stayed clean, a perfectly trimmed lawn. A quiet neighborhood with friendly neighbors who waved when you passed by and invited you to block parties. But inside it felt like a museum. Cold, silent, preserved, but lifeless. Everything was in its place except me. I'd walk down the hallway at night, past the kids' rooms with their nightlights glowing soft and steady, past Daniel's office with the door cracked open and that blue light always glowing, and I'd feel this ache deep in my chest, a longing I couldn't explain, a hunger I couldn't name. Nathan didn't feel that ache, but he noticed it. And that in itself was enough to wake something up in me that I thought had died. One afternoon, just as I was folding laundry in the living room, Nathan stopped by. It wasn't unusual. He came around often enough that the kids barely looked up anymore. He was holding 2 paint samples in his hand and laughing to himself. "I'm making a mess of this decorating thing," he said, walking in like he always did. Comfortable, familiar, like he belonged there. I laughed. "You're asking the wrong person. My idea of design is not tripping over Legos on the way to the kitchen." "No, seriously," he said, his smile fading into something more genuine. "I could use your help. I need a woman's eye. It'll take 30 minutes, tops. I've got to pick out some furniture and art stuff, and I don't want the place to look like a bachelor pad exploded." Before I could answer, Daniel called from upstairs, his voice distant and distracted. "You should go, Mia. He needs help and I don't have time for that stuff." And just like that, it was decided. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, grabbed my purse, and told the kids I'd be back soon. I didn't think anything of it. I really didn't. The home store was one of those cozy, upscale places. Dim lighting, soft music playing through hidden speakers, everything arranged just so. Not your typical furniture warehouse, but somewhere you'd go if you cared about aesthetics. The kind of place where you could get lost, just running your hands over soft throws and driftwood wall art and candles that smelled like fig and cashmere. Nathan was like a kid in a candy store, cracking jokes, pulling out the most ridiculous things just to make me laugh. He held up a zebra-striped rug at one point and asked, dead serious, "Too much jungle or just enough Tarzan?" "Too much, definitely too much," I said, laughing harder than I had in weeks, and I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in a long time. I didn't feel like a mom. I didn't feel like someone's forgotten wife. I felt light, like myself again, like the version of me that existed before all the responsibilities and routines buried her alive. But it wasn't just the laughter. It was the way he listened. He'd say things like, "You always pick earth tones, huh? You like warm spaces." And I remember freezing for a second because how did he notice that? Daniel never did. I'd redecorated the living room last spring, spent weeks picking out colors and fabrics, and Daniel hadn't even looked up from his laptop when I asked his opinion. Just said, "Whatever you think is best." Nathan noticed everything, my favorite colors, that I wore my hair differently when I was in a good mood, that I rubbed my thumb against my palm when I was anxious, that I always ordered decaf after 3 in the afternoon. Small things, tiny things, but they added up. It was flattering. No, it was more than that. It was addictive. At one point, I was trying to reach a picture frame on a high shelf. It was just out of reach, and I was on my toes, stretching, fingers barely brushing the edge. Nathan stepped in behind me and stretched up to grab it. And for a moment, just a second, his body was close to mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something clean and woody, close enough that I forgot how to breathe. When he handed me the frame, our hands brushed. Neither of us moved. His eyes met mine, and there was this silence that hung between us. Not awkward, not forced, just charged, electric. The air felt thicker. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it, and I don't even think I blinked. Then I laughed, too quickly, too loudly. And just like that, the moment passed. It was innocent. At least that's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overthinking it, that it was just a nice afternoon with a friend who made me feel seen. But later that night, as I stood in the kitchen washing dishes, my hands moved automatically, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept thinking about the way his voice softened when he said my name. The way he looked at me, not with hunger, but with intention, like I mattered, like I was worth paying attention to. I didn't tell Daniel about the store. I didn't mention the zebra rug or the picture frame or the way Nathan's hand felt against mine. I didn't say a word, because deep down, something had shifted, and I wasn't ready to name it yet. I wasn't ready to admit what was happening, and that wasn't the last time Nathan asked for help, or the last time I said yes. After that first trip to the store, it became easier to say yes. Nathan would call or text every now and then, nothing out of line, nothing inappropriate, just little things. What do you think of this lamp? Or, should I hang the art lower or higher? And each time I found myself responding faster than I meant to, typing back immediately, offering to come over and help, making excuses to see him. We started meeting for coffee. At first, we called it design check-ins, an excuse really, a reason to sit and talk without naming what it was. We'd sit in that little cafe on Pine Street, the one with the mismatched mugs and the cinnamon smell that lingered in the air and made everything feel warmer than it was. It became our spot. Familiar. Safe. We'd laugh a lot. He'd tease me about how I overanalyzed everything, how I could spend 20 minutes debating between two throw pillows. And I'd roll my eyes when he forgot half the measurements I gave him for his apartment, when he'd text me asking the same questions I'd already answered twice. It all felt so light, so easy. I hadn't felt that kind of lightness in years, and yet, underneath it all, I felt something twisting in my chest. A knot tightening every time I got dressed to see him, every time I stayed out longer than I said I would. Every time I cleared my messages before walking in the front door. Every time I checked over my shoulder like I was doing something wrong. I wasn't cheating. I told myself that over and over. I wasn't cheating. I was just seen. Do you know what it feels like to be seen? To have someone actually look at you? Not through you, not past you, but right at you like you matter, like your thoughts are interesting, like your presence is enough. Nathan made me feel like I was still a woman. Not just a mom, not just someone's wife, but someone worthy of attention, of laughter, of feeling, of being desired. And Daniel never asked where I'd been. He never questioned the extra time. Never looked up when I came in the door an hour late from groceries or errands. Never noticed when I started wearing perfume again. Never commented when I bought new clothes. Maybe he trusted me too much, or maybe he just didn't notice anymore. I used to wonder if he'd always been like that. Quiet, distracted, half absent, or if it had happened slowly, bit by bit, while we were both too busy to see it. The kids, the routines, the life we built, it had all blurred together into something functional but empty. And some nights I'd lie beside him in bed, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing, steady and even. And I'd think to myself, would he even notice if I disappeared? Would he roll over and keep sleeping? Would he wake up in the morning and go about his day like nothing had changed? That thought haunted me, because I didn't want to disappear. I just wanted him to pull me close again, to care, to ask, to see. But he didn't, and Nathan kept showing up. He helped me move a bookshelf one afternoon. The kids were at school, Daniel was at work, and I'd texted Nathan asking if he had a free hour. He showed up with tools and a grin, and we ended up sitting on the floor surrounded by books and dust and laughter. He made a joke about one of the romance novels I'd left lying around, something cheesy about shirtless men on covers, and I hit him with a pillow. We laughed until we couldn't breathe, until my sides hurt and tears streamed down my face. Then we were quiet. He looked at me, not like a friend, not like Daniel ever had, and something shifted in the air, something dangerous. I stood up quickly. pretended I needed to make tea, anything to stop the moment from settling in too deep, but it followed me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his eyes, about how long he'd looked at me, about the ache in my chest that I couldn't name anymore. The guilt started to grow, like vines, slow but strong, wrapping around everything, around my smiles, around my silence, around the way I started pulling away from Daniel, inch by inch, just to protect the pieces of myself I felt I was losing again. But I kept going back, because I couldn't stay away. We texted every night now, nothing inappropriate, not at first, just little things. Inside jokes, memes, quotes from movies we both loved. You up? At midnight. Thinking about you at noon. Miss our talks in the afternoons when I was folding laundry and pretending everything was normal. And every night, I'd hear the soft buzz of my phone and feel a thrill that didn't belong there, a rush that made my hands shake and my heart race. Daniel never noticed, or if he did, he said nothing. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any suspicion ever could. One evening, Nathan and I were driving back from a home goods store. The sun was setting, casting this soft golden light over everything, making the world look warmer than it felt. He was humming along to the radio, tapping the steering wheel when he suddenly turned to me. I don't think I've ever met someone who understands me the way you do. I froze. He wasn't smiling when he said it. There was no humor in his voice, just this quiet vulnerability that landed in the pit of my stomach like a stone. I mean it, he said, glancing over, his eyes serious. I talk to you and it's like I don't have to explain everything, you just get it. I didn't know what to say, I should have said nothing. I should have changed the subject, redirected, made a joke, anything. But instead, I felt my throat tighten. My eyes sting, because I did understand him. And worse, he understood me too. He saw the cracks. He saw what Daniel didn't. And that scared me more than anything else. Because it wasn't about furniture anymore, or design, or even attention. It was about connection, real, deep connection. And I was dangerously close to crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But then Nathan said something that made my heart stop. If I'd met you before Daniel, things would have been different. We sat there in the car as the sky darkened, the soft hum of the engine the only sound for a moment. Nathan's words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. Heavier than anything else we'd said to each other. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to pretend I didn't hear it. I wanted to laugh it off like a silly compliment that meant nothing. But it wasn't silly, and it meant something. We both knew it. He glanced over at me, our eyes met, and for the first time I didn't look away. That night I lay in bed beside Daniel, wide awake. My body was still, but my mind was screaming. I kept replaying that moment over and over again. The tone of Nathan's voice, the sincerity in his eyes, the what if hanging between us like fog, thick and impossible to see through. The next day I dressed differently, subtle but intentional, a little more effort. A softer blouse, a touch of perfume I hadn't worn in months, not for Daniel, not for the kids, just in case Nathan dropped by, and he did. He stopped in around noon, said he was just passing through, asked if I wanted to grab lunch. I said yes without checking the calendar, without thinking. I was supposed to meet Daniel at his office that day. Some charity luncheon. Something corporate and boring that we'd RSVP'd to 2 weeks ago. I called him and told him I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a total lie. My heart was tangled in knots. My stomach was churning, but it wasn't sickness. It was guilt and something else. Something I didn't want to name. Lunch with Nathan was casual. Sandwiches, iced tea, small talk, but there was something under it all now. A current, a pull, a tension that felt too warm, too close. He reached across the table to hand me a napkin and his fingers brushed mine. He didn't pull away. I should have, but I didn't. Because in that moment, the warmth of his hand against mine was the first thing in months that made me feel alive, and that scared me, but it didn't stop me. I started checking my phone constantly, watching for his name, waiting for the 3 little dots to appear, that tiny signal that he was thinking about me, that little spark of adrenaline every time his message popped up. Thinking about you. Can't wait to see you. Miss our talks. It became a secret I wrapped myself in, a hidden part of my life that no one else could touch. I told myself it was harmless, just attention, just comfort, just 2 lonely people leaning on each other, but it was more than that. It was always more than that. I began to find excuses to see him, errands that took me past his neighborhood, design advice that required in-person consultations, helping him pick out curtains, then towels, then dishes. And every time we'd talk longer, laugh harder, sit just a little bit closer. One night after dinner, he stayed behind. The kids were in bed. Daniel was holed up in his office as usual, typing away on some urgent email that couldn't wait until morning. Nathan and I sat in the living room. We shared a glass of wine, talked about music. I told him about the songs I used to dance to when I was younger, back when I still felt like myself. He smiled and said, "I can picture that. You spinning around a kitchen, eyes closed, hair everywhere." Then it got quiet. He reached for the wine glass in my hand. His fingers brushed mine, then stayed there, just a second too long. I should have pulled away, but I didn't, and he didn't either. We just sat there, fingers touching, hearts racing, both pretending not to notice what was happening between us, both knowing exactly what was happening. The next day, I deleted our text thread. I was terrified Daniel would find it, that he'd pick up my phone for some innocent reason and see Nathan's name and wonder why we were talking so much. Deleting the messages didn't delete the feeling. If anything, it made it worse, like trying to bury something that had already taken root. And the more I buried, the deeper I dug myself. I started lying, not big lies, just enough to move the lines around. I'd say I was at the grocery store when I wasn't. I'd say I had a headache when I just didn't want to be touched. I stopped inviting Daniel to go on walks with me, started going alone. Except I wasn't alone. Not really. Nathan would meet me at the trail behind the old park. We'd talk. Sometimes we wouldn't say much at all. But everything we didn't say hung in the space between us. Heavy, undeniable. The almost betrayal came on a Thursday. I'll never forget it. Nathan had invited me to see how the apartment looked now that it was mostly done. He was proud. He'd actually taken most of my advice and the place looked good. Warm, lived in, like someone cared. We ordered takeout. Ate on his couch. Laughed about a terrible lamp he insisted on keeping, some gaudy thing with a bronze base and a shade covered in tassels. As I was leaving, he walked me to the door. I turned to say goodbye and he leaned in, slow, gentle. His lips brushed my cheek, but it wasn't just a friendly kiss. It was too close to the corner of my mouth, too deliberate. He lingered. And then he paused, like he was waiting for me to turn my head. I didn't, but I also didn't move away. We stood there for what felt like forever. His breath warm against my skin, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Then I opened the door and left, without saying a word. That night I couldn't stop shaking, not because I was afraid of being caught, but because I was afraid of how much I wanted to go back, how much I wanted to turn my head, how much I wanted him. The lines were blurring. My marriage felt like a duty. My days felt like tasks. And Nathan, he felt like a lifeline, like a reminder that I was still someone worth noticing. Worth wanting. I thought I could control it. I thought I was strong enough to keep it at a distance, to keep it innocent, to keep it from going too far, until that night at his place. It was a Friday night. The sky had been overcast all day, heavy and gray, and by early evening the rain came, in sheets at first. Soft, then steady, relentless. The kind of rain that makes the world feel smaller, quieter, like everything slows down, like time itself is holding its breath. Daniel had a late dinner with clients. He didn't even ask what I was doing that night. Just gave me a quick nod, his phone already to his ear, talking numbers as he grabbed his coat and walked out the door. I stood there for a few minutes, watching the rain slide down the windows, listening to the steady drumming on the roof. My phone buzzed. "Nathan, you free tonight? I picked up that bottle of wine you said you loved. Come warm up with me." I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have said no. I should have said no. But I didn't. I told the kids I'd be back before they went to bed. Left a note on the counter in case Daniel came home early. Then I grabbed my umbrella and drove. The streets were quiet, glistening in the rain. His apartment windows glowed warm against the gray outside. It felt inviting, dangerous. I could already feel my heart pounding before I stepped out of the car. When he opened the door, I was hit by the scent of something rich. Cinnamon, maybe, cloves. A candle flickered on the counter. 2 glasses, 1 bottle already opened. He smiled softly. "Come in, you're soaked." I stood in his doorway for a second, almost willing myself to turn around, but my feet didn't listen. Inside, everything felt too quiet, too intimate. The lights were low. The only sound was the rain tapping against the windows and the occasional crackle from the wick of the candle. We sat on the couch. Close, but not touching. The wine was smooth, heavy. We talked about nothing. And then suddenly about everything. About Daniel, about his distance. My loneliness, the years that had passed without either of us noticing. Nathan didn't push. He didn't rush. He just listened. And then he said something I wasn't ready for. "If you were mine, I would have noticed when you started fading." The words pierced something inside me, sharp and deep. I didn't speak, I didn't move, I just sat there, eyes fixed on the flame dancing between us. And then he asked, barely above a whisper, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if things were different?" I nodded. We were both quiet. And in that silence, everything felt charged. Thick, impossible. He leaned in slowly, gently, and I didn't move. I didn't stop him. I didn't even flinch. His lips brushed mine, not with hunger, but with this aching softness. Like he'd been holding it back for far too long, and still I didn't stop him. It felt wrong, so wrong and inevitable. That night blurred in my memory like a half-remembered dream. Soft hands, whispered apologies, wine-stained breath, clothes falling to the floor in slow motion. 1,000 unspoken fears melted into skin and heat and longing. I wish I could say I stopped him. I wish I could say I regretted it right away. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I felt everything I'd been starving for. The touch, the closeness, the sense of being wanted. It was intoxicating. But morning has a way of making everything look different. I woke up before he did. The candle had burned low, the rain had stopped, and suddenly the silence felt hollow, ugly. I got dressed slowly. My hands were shaking. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even look back as I closed his door behind me. When I got home, the house was dark. Daniel wasn't back yet. The kids were asleep. Everything was still, just as I had left it, except nothing was the same anymore. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the glass I'd left on the counter earlier, and I felt it. This crushing wave of shame, of guilt, of panic. I had done it. I had crossed the line. There was no taking it back, no undoing it. And suddenly, the world felt too loud, too sharp. My skin felt like it didn't fit right anymore. My heartbeat was like thunder in my ears. I wanted to scream or cry or disappear. But I did none of those things. I just stood there, still, silent. Because once you break something like that, once you betray something sacred, it doesn't just go away. It doesn't just vanish in the morning light. I told myself I could live with it, that I could bury it. Pretend it was just one moment, just one mistake. But the universe doesn't let betrayal go unpaid for long, and mine was coming faster than I ever could have imagined. The next morning, I moved like a shadow through the house. I didn't speak much, didn't eat. I made the kids breakfast on autopilot, smiling when they asked for syrup, nodding when they told me stories from their dreams. But inside, I felt like I was standing on broken glass. Every step careful, every breath measured. I avoided mirrors. I couldn't face myself. I didn't want to see the version of me staring back. The version I didn't recognize anymore. The version that crossed the line. The version that let it happen. I opened the drawer in the kitchen and picked up my phone. My hands were trembling as I stared at the screen. There were already 3 unread messages from Nathan. "Are you okay? We need to talk. Please don't shut me out." I stared at them for a long time. Then I deleted them, every single one, and I turned the phone off. It wasn't just guilt, it was something deeper. Shame, fear, I wasn't even sure. All I knew was that if I let him in again, even just to talk, I might fall even further. And I didn't know how much further there was left to go before I completely lost myself. I didn't reply. I couldn't. That day, I avoided everything. I didn't go out. I didn't answer calls. I didn't leave the house except to take out the trash. And even then, I looked around like someone was watching me, like I was a fugitive in my own life. When Daniel came home, something was different. He looked at me longer than usual, really looked, like he was trying to find something on my face. Some sign, some crack in the surface. "Everything all right?" he asked casually, like he already knew it wasn't. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't push, but he didn't smile either. Instead, he walked past me, dropped his briefcase on the floor harder than he needed to, and went straight upstairs. And that hit harder than if he'd yelled. That night, the distance between us felt like a canyon. He didn't kiss me goodnight, didn't even touch my hand. He lay there with his back to me, his breathing steady, his silence louder than any fight we'd ever had. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the walls close in. I kept waiting for Nathan to stop trying, but he didn't. The next day, more texts came, long ones, short ones, all begging for a response. "You don't have to go through this alone. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have let it happen like that, but I meant every second of it. Talk to me." I turned my phone off again. I thought it would make things better. But it didn't, because everything at home started to shift. Daniel grew colder, distant in a different way now, calculated. There were longer stares, shorter conversations. His "I love you" disappeared. He left earlier in the mornings, came back later at night, and he watched me. I could feel it, not obvious, but enough. Enough to make my skin prickle. Enough to make my chest tighten when I heard his footsteps behind me. Enough to make me start wondering if he knew, or maybe he didn't know exactly what happened. but he knew something, he had to. You can only pretend for so long before the cracks show. I became hyper-aware of everything, the way I spoke, how long I looked at my phone, where I left my keys, whether my clothes smelled like candle wax or red wine. The guilt was eating me alive, and the silence from Nathan became louder than ever, because even though I wasn't answering, his words still echoed in my head. That night, his hands, his eyes, the things we said, things I couldn't take back. I began snapping at the kids, not yelling, but shorter, sharper. My patience was thinner. I hated that they could feel something was wrong even if they didn't understand what it was. One night after I put them to bed, I sat in the hallway, alone, lights off, back against the wall. I felt like the walls were closing in around me. What had I done? Who was I? I used to think I was a good person, a loyal wife, a devoted mother. But now I didn't know anymore. Everything I was had unraveled in one night. And then, as I was changing the sheets a few days later, I lifted the mattress to tuck the corner tight. Something I've done 1,000 times before. But this time I noticed something. A folded piece of paper tucked near the edge, just barely out of sight. I hesitated. My stomach dropped. I reached for it slowly, as if touching it too quickly might set something on fire. And when I opened it, I froze. It was Daniel's handwriting. My hands were trembling as I held the letter. Daniel's handwriting was unmistakable. Sharp, clean, careful. The kind of writing that always looked like he was trying too hard to stay in control. I unfolded it slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The first line stopped me cold. I don't know how to say this to you out loud, so maybe writing it will be easier. I sat on the edge of the bed and kept reading. I've been watching you for weeks now, not in a creepy way, just noticing. For the first time in a long time, I've really noticed you, and I realize now that I haven't been doing that for a while, that I let us drift, that I let you feel alone while I buried myself in work and thought that paying bills and keeping the lights on was enough. I blinked hard, my throat tightened. You don't laugh the same way anymore. You don't touch me the same way. And I kept telling myself it was just life, just stress. But the truth is, I failed you. I stopped showing up, and the letter ended there, unfinished, like he couldn't find the words or like he ran out of courage. I sat there holding that piece of paper, and for the first time in weeks I cried. Not quiet tears, not the kind you can wipe away and pretend didn't happen, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. Because he saw me fading. He saw what I thought was invisible, and he was trying. In his own broken, inadequate way, he was trying. And I had already betrayed him.